Welcome to tutorial for God Hand on hard mode. And this game is really brutal until you learn how to crowd control. You know, on normal, it wasn't too bad for me because I beat it years ago. So, you know, returning to it, I was able to get through normal pretty quickly. But you have to beat normal to unlock the hard mode, which you'll want to do anyway because you want to have at least a basic understanding of the controls. So I'm not going to detail the controls too much, mainly just the moves that I use. But yeah, when I first tried this, I wasn't able to fight more than one enemy at a time years ago. And I had to actually lure them out individually, which was insanely tedious and difficult. And I had to fight them like one at a time and then retreat until they went back to their original position and then lure out the next guy. And it was pretty much, you know, if I would have tried to do that for the whole game, I would have never beat it. So this time around, you know, I knew I had to learn how to actually fight multiple enemies at once. So yeah, I'll try to break down how I manage multiple enemies at once. I mean, obviously a lot of it is just getting familiar with the game. You definitely want to use the radar in the top right because it shows those little dots and those are the enemies on screen. So you can get an idea of where they're positioned around your character. You know, since you're in the middle of the radar, the characters around the edge, you can see if guys are surrounding you. Definitely want to use that. My playstyle ended up being different than what I saw in a lot of videos. I saw a lot of people like to use the right analog stick. If you hit it up, you'll do a bobbing and weaving kind of dodge, where you stand in place and you kind of just move your upper torso around to dodge things. And you'll be invincible as long as you're doing it, unless an enemy attacks you with a low attack. And there may be enemies that can grab you to get through that too, but definitely low attacks will hit you if you're doing that. So it's not as safe. What I like to do is I like to use the flick the right analog stick back and use the back flip, which is also invincible when you do the back. Anytime you do the back flip, you have invincibility frames. So I use that to get distance away from the enemies, and then I try to group them together. And I'll usually close the distance with a running jump kick. So I use the back flip to get away from enemies. I let them kind of group together, and then I'll come in with a flying jump kick. It's a strategy I use a lot throughout the entire game. Now, by this point, I'm sure you probably know about guard breaks and the basics of combat. You know, if you beat normal, you have to beat normal to have this mode unlocked. So, you know, I don't think I really need to cover all the basic controls. I mean, that video would take over an hour to get in depth with the combat on this game. There's so many different moves and ways to mix things together with launches and, you know, a lot of mechanics to the game that I didn't even use because I really only used what was effective for me. I didn't get super deep with the combat, so that's why I'm mainly just going to talk about what I used. The appearance of these demons is very random. Sometimes you may get one, sometimes you might get like two of them. They come out of regular enemies, but you never know when they're going to appear. So there may be a few scripted appearances of them, but for the most part, they will come out randomly. And in some areas, I can really determine if you beat a section or not on that attempt, because that can really fuck you up if you don't have a full God Hand meter or some roulettes. My basic strategy when it comes to dealing with them is that I try not to use my God Hand at all until they appear. When they appear, I usually always use it. It makes them a lot easier to deal with, and I just save it up for them. And I had a lot of success dealing with them that way. You know, you can fight them regularly, but they are some of the hardest enemies to deal with. So, you know, things can definitely go bad. You can kind of use this narrow stairway here to kind of group these guys together a little bit, so that at least they're kind of, you know, they're both ahead of you, and you don't have guys getting on your side too much. But they will still, you know, they can still get around you. But you can utilize things like that in the environment. It's also extremely useful to grab boxes because you're going to break them anyway to see if there's items in them. So it's useful to grab the boxes and throw them at as many enemies as you can. I mean, you don't have to go crazy with it if you're confident in the section. You can just take the guys without it, but you can really knock their health down by throwing boxes at them. Like I said, when I first played hard mode, I was horrible at this mode, and I used to just throw boxes at the enemies to lure them out and damage them. And I would go around and just lure each enemy out individually, which was insanely tedious and long. And I did eventually make it to the two gays, the Mr. Silver and Mr. Gold fight, which is the first boss you face. I eventually made it to that, but I did not have the skills to deal with them, and I also didn't know that I needed to pick up the dragon kick to even have a decent chance at beating them. So I'm going to explain how to get the dragon kick, and I'm going to say definitely get the dragon kick, because if you don't get that, you're probably going to have a hell of a time later on. So I highly recommend taking a little extra time to get the dragon kick. It's very easy to miss, but you just have to get this medicine for a civilian and you'll get it. So here I'm just running around and collecting, you know, some of the boxes, things like that. You know, you can take your time with that because the enemies don't tend to rush you until you engage them. And even then you can run away if you want and come back later and they'll be waiting for you. But they won't chase you that far. So these are things that you can exploit with the AI and use to your advantage to take a more patient approach if you're having trouble. Obviously, though, you know, you will eventually run out of resources. You know, there's only so many boxes that have items in them. And it's important to note that pretty much I think everything that's in boxes and vases that you break, all the items you get are completely random. So I had times when I did better, and a lot of the reason that I did better was because I had better item drops, basically. So, you know, keep that in mind. If you have better item drops, then you're going to have a better time. Sometimes you may even want to, you know, there's parts that are really hard. You may want to bring really good items to the next encounter at times in this game to plan ahead a little bit. And if you're trying to do that, then this guide will help you do that because you'll see what's coming up next. But if you want to do that, then you may even want to commit suicide until you have some, you know, a good amount of extra items for the next area. You know, if you drained all your items on an easier area, you may not want to accept that as a valid run. You may want to reload your save or commit suicide and do it over. You know, you don't always have to be that anal about it, but there's going to be times when you're going to make it a lot easier on yourself because the next encounter is going to be so difficult. You know, and luckily most boss fights do have a decent amount of items and boxes and shit that you can throw at the boss and you know, you have a chance of getting some good item refills like roulette refill, God meter refill. And I'm going to assume you know what these things are because luckily I don't have to explain everything because if you beat normal, you already have a basic understanding of the game. So I don't think I need to go into every button. But triangle, square, and X are going to be your three buttons where you can map various attacks and combos to them, you know, which, you know, in the menus, I'm sure you've seen this by now. And what I like to do is I don't like to have any attacks that take long to pull off. I pretty much put all basic jabs in my square hits. I use square for my punches, and I pretty much use all basic attacks. So I want fast attacks. They don't have to do a lot of damage. I basically just want to have fast attacks. And the guard breaker, you know, I'll do that manually because you can set that to one of your to part of the combo. Like you can have it as the guard break attack happens in like the third hit of the combo, but that's very unreliable. So what I do is I just do it manually. Obviously, you use the guard break whenever the guy's blocking, and that's gonna allow you to break his guard and get in those extra hits. Which, if you get in enough hits on an enemy, you can get them in a stagger state and then hit circle to do a suplex or some type of stagger state move. So you do want to stagger enemies as much as possible when you can. And there's going to be a lot of strategies. There's going to be ways to exploit most of the bosses once you get two moves. And that's going to be, I think it's called Yes Ma'am Thank You or something. Or Yes Ma'am KABLAM, I think is the name of it. That's one of the moves. And then there's Chain Yanker. So I believe I show how to get both of those moves. But you want those two moves for sure. Because a lot of the strategies that I'm going to be using are going to be heavily using that method of using those two moves heavily. Which I'll explain when I start doing it. I can't do it until later. This first stage, by the way, took me around 13 hours. So very, very difficult fucking stage. The hardest stage in the game for me. For some reason, it took me 6 hours to beat ELVIS, the main boss of the level. But, and by stage, I mean this whole first stage, not the sections, but when it says stage clear up to that point. Basically, up to the point that this video covers is what took me 13 hours to beat on this difficulty. So, it's a lot harder than it looks, that's for sure. That's why I put it in the Brutal Games playlist, which I only reserve for very specific games. And this game definitely qualified. I had over 999 deaths, and I believe it took around 34 and a half hours to beat. So, very difficult mode. It's only, as you can see, it's only a 4.5 hour game. So, near 35 hours is a long time. So yeah, now I mean, like when you get the hammer, you want to, obviously use it. It's good to save for harder enemies because the hammer does a lot of damage. You can also, of course, throw it to do a lot of damage, but it wastes the hammer, as far as I remember. So, La Bamba is a good early move that does a lot of crowd damage. If you can get everybody grouped together and you're having, a difficult fight, you can use it to clear out, and then finish off, when you have a bunch of thugs surrounding you. It's a good move. You also want to save. You want to save item drops because they don't disappear, and you probably know this already. But you want to save them as much as possible, and not if you get a roulette card that gives you like 3 or 2 roulette orbs, you don't want to use that when you only need 1 to refill. You know what I mean? Waste the other one first, and then get it so that you can get maximum use out of your roulettes. Same with God Hand. If you have a God Hand meter that's half full, you may want to fill it up by fighting enemies first instead of getting the God Hand meter pickup. That way you get another extra God Hand afterwards. You can either use that to bring into the next area, or if you need it, you can use it in that stage. But you can make your own decisions about that. But you want to try to really conserve item drops. See, I get it now because I didn't end up needing it, and this area is pretty much done. So that's why I went back and picked it up. So just keep things like that in mind. And obviously you get checkpoints in each new area. And some areas actually have checkpoints in the middle of the area as well. So, there is that. But see, this took around 21 minutes apparently, just that little section on hard. So I'm sure I died a decent number of times. Though I did much, much better this time around. Maybe because I came right off of normal and I don't know, for whatever reason, I was able to manage the crowds much better this time. I might have gotten better overall at, just adapting in general to these kind of games. But yeah, this part, I mean, it's not especially bad. This one purple guy is the hardest guy of the bunch. He can be aggressive. But you're going to use similar strategies with, throwing out your punches and using guard breaks as soon as the enemies block. Once you get used to timing it, you see I still wasn't super good at it. But I get better as I get farther in the game because the game forces me to improve. And you also have more abilities at your disposal, more health and things like that. So even though the enemy arrangements become much more longer and difficult later on, a lot of times it was easier for me because I had so much more to work with and I was more familiar with the game. So you will see better playing as I get farther. So yeah. See, Exploding Barrel does huge damage. So utilize the throws. I mean, because you can pretty much just throw shit at this guy and pretty much kill him almost off of that. If you want to throw all the barrels and shit at him, you could do that. And he won't really have much health left, so you can always save him for this guy. So yeah, and using these things like pummel and suplex, these stun finishers where you hit circle, by using these you also build up your God Hand meter a decent amount. So they are useful to use. So there's another exploit that I'm going to show here, but it's not going to be useful until way later in the game. But you'll get a taste for what it is. It's very simple, and I'll make sure to explain it again because I don't expect people to watch the full video. People are probably going to be checking in sections for help on specific areas. Most people are not going to watch a full tutorial. This is really just my successful playthrough, and now I'm doing commentary over it about 2 years later. So there's a lot of stuff I don't remember. I had to take some notes to try to remember some things, and there's going to be things that I miss because it's not fresh in my mind anymore. But, it's better to do it now than to wait another 5 years before I add commentary to it. So I also have the full playthrough in a single video. I posted that up as well. So if you just want to, hear the sounds of the game and not my voice, check that. But I found that putting in game sound with my voice just doesn't come out well, and it drowns out the voice. So That's why I usually just isolate it and just do voice only for tutorials. So yeah, here you're going to be dealing with more of the similar type of guys that we've been dealing with. And, you know, I guess it would be helpful if there was more that I could really say. I think the main thing I learned, really, that helped me, because, I mean, before I could have never gotten this far fighting guys all at once. So, I know there's probably a lot more that I should be saying about it, but I feel like the main thing that really helped me was the technique of, you know, using backflips to get away from enemies quickly and waiting until they group together and then running in with jump kicks and trying to attack them at once and then retreating again. You know, because if you can crowd them together and hit multiple enemies at once, that also works very well. Now here I ended up using some stuff because I had a refill, so I was able to just waste this shit because I was going to just, you know, be able to refill because the next area is coming up next. So see, I wasted it, but I got my full refill from the card, so that filled my roulettes back up, so I didn't need to save it. So if you get a good drop, then you can be wasteful like that and make things easier on yourself. But yeah, that encounter is not too different. Actually, the thing that I forgot to explain is when I went to that, there was a ferry that it's a trial that you can do. There's no sense in completing those trials, by the way. There's no benefit on hard mode because we're gonna farm money another way, so you don't need to do those. Those only give you money. So yeah, so basically, whenever you talk to that ferry, it's like a ferry in the middle of the arena in that last area. Whenever you talk to a ferry, you create a checkpoint, which is an insane way to exploit this game. Because what you could do is you could kill a few enemies, go back to the ferry and talk to it, and you just created another save point. Which means if you die, you're going to start there again, probably with full life. And you're gonna have whatever enemies you defeated are going to be permanently dead. So, you know, use that information as you like, but that makes later areas hugely manageable. I mean, it's just a matter of time, basically, on some of the really hard areas later on. It's not something you can use in all the big encounters, but when it shows up, you're going to be thankful that you have the ability to do that. And I will explain that again. So yeah, a lot of people that I see, most players will use the up dodge on the right analog stick to kind of bob around. But I don't like it because I end up getting tripped or some other bullshit happens. I might get grabbed or something. So I don't like using it. I almost never use it unless I'm stuck in a corner with like 3 guys and I can't get out of the corner. You know, I can't backflip out of a corner. Then I'll use it. Also, if you hit R1, I believe it is, either L1 or R1, it will make you do a 180-degree quick turn, which is extremely useful for getting out of situations and you know, attacking guys directly behind you, which you're going to be using the radar to see when guys are behind you. Now, I mess up these a lot. All you have to do is jiggle the left analog stick left and right. But I think when I was using the Xbox One Elite controller, you know, the analogs are a little different, and I found it a lot harder to get out of those. I think once I switched to a regular PS2 controller, I actually started playing a lot better. I was using an Xbox One Elite controller on the emulator, so I found the analogs were harder to grip, and I couldn't do things as quickly. I still like the PS2 controller better than that controller as far as performance for me. Being able, you know, because my thumbs, the analog sticks on the Elite are a little bit too high for my thumbs, so I'm mostly playing with the edges of the analog sticks, which is not good. Now, I shouldn't have thrown that in the doorway. Don't do that. You see, I almost killed myself by doing that shit. You know, I could have just lured the guy out, waited. I was being impatient. I could have waited for him to come out of the door, or maybe walked in the doorway a little farther. But yeah, more of these standard enemies. Once you've fought a few of these, or you know, it's a matter of just, you know, hitting them and guard breaking them when they block, and then rolling back when they hit. After a while, you'll get used to it, but just remember that it's, you know, it may take you hours to learn how to crowd control efficiently, but once you learn that skill, that's going to be what gets you through the entire game. So it's not a waste of time if you die a lot on the first stage, or even the first. You know, you may die a shitload on that first area of the game, because I did originally when I originally tried this years ago. But that was because I did not know how to fight multiple enemies at once, and I was too stubborn to try to fight them at once. I was just trying cheap shit like throwing boxes at them and running away to try to isolate them. So just commit to the fact that you're going to have to learn how to deal with multiple enemies at once. Don't shy away from that. Now for this part, you're going to see I'm chasing this guy, and throwing shit at him did not work. But I'm going to be chasing this guy for a while. It is a pain in the ass, but this is something that you really have to do if you want to have a good chance against the two gays that are coming up, the Mr. Gold and Mr. Silver boss fight. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult. Probably the hardest part in the game without the dragon kick. So, if you do want to deal with that, you don't have to get the dragon kick, but I recommend getting it. So, here's a fairy. Now, by talking to this fairy, you will get a checkpoint, as I said. So, if you want to get a checkpoint, you can. I probably wouldn't do it here, though, because in case that the guy with the medicine escaped and then you made a checkpoint, you might not be able to get the dragon kick. I don't know if he does escape at any point. I think he'll just keep running around forever until you catch him. But it is very possible to just ignore him and not chase him and just leave the area. You don't want to do that. He shows up as a yellow blip with a circle around him, a circle radiating from him. See it on the upper right mini-map? That's what you're trying to chase after. So I recommend ignoring all the enemies and just keep chasing him until you're able to pin him down and kill him. Because like I said, you really want that medicine. You're going to bring it to that guy laying on the floor right there. But, see, this is the guy you got to catch. See, he's very sneaky, very quick. But I recommend just keep trying until you get him. You may not even have to kill all the enemies to get to the next area. You may be able to just leave. But a lot of times, you know, in this game, I believe you can just run through an area and just go to the exit door and just leave and not even fight the enemies. There's times when you can do that. But if you want to do that, you can try to do that, but at least make sure you deal with this guy and get the medicine and give it back to the guy on the floor. See, now I got the medicine. He got mixed up in a fight with all these guys too, so I take care of these guys while I'm at it. But now that I got the medicine, you know, I'm pretty much good with this area. So, yeah, so now you just give them the medicine. And by doing this, you're going to get the dragon kick, like I said, which is, it's mostly important early on in the game, but the main use for a while is going to be on that one fight, is where it's going to really, really save your ass. So I died here, but I left it in because there's a checkpoint here. And I think this is the same area where I just got the medicine from the guy, but I think what I was doing was farming items to bring into the next area. I think that's why I'm running around here. I think I already have the dragon kick, if I remember right. So I think I'm just checking, you know, checking for items. And yeah, don't worry about money. There's a technique later to get money. Picking up fruit while you have full life will give you some money as well. So you can get a little bit of money doing that if you want it. But yeah, I think here I was just scavenging for some supplies. Health you don't really need to worry about, because when you get to the next area, I think if you die in the next area, you'll get a full health refill anyway. So you don't really have to farm health if you're going to run into the next area. But you may want to grab stuff like God Hand, roulettes, things for the next area. So you get that roulette there. So now I got everything I need, I think. And I think now I may just leave. So you don't even have to fight any of these enemies, I think. I think you can just leave the area. But yeah, just make sure you get the dragon kick. You don't have to deal with those guys if you don't want, but just get the dragon kick and then leave if you want. Gather whatever supplies you need. Like I said, it is very important a lot of times to try to grab as many supplies as you can, or not use a lot of stuff so that you have shit for the next areas. So now here is the fight against Mr. Gold and Silver. This is possibly the hardest part of the game if you don't have the dragon kick. You're going to be dealing with enemies 2 at a time, which is not too new, but they can still really drain your health fast. They may even be more aggressive in this area, because they seem a lot harder. But I have a technique that I use on the Mr. Gold and Silver fight that using the dragon kick is extremely useful. And as I said, like, you get different item drops from the boxes every time. It's random. So you may have a better run sometimes just because you got really good item drops. It can make all the difference. I mean, you still have to be able to play this part well regardless, but if you're already decent at this part, you know, and you get good item drops, it can give you that extra edge. You see, I already got some good drops with that King Crown card that gives you like a pretty much a full refill of the roulettes. So that's a good start. You know, use the boxes too to drain enemy health. You know, you can fight them a lot less directly by throwing boxes at them. And at the same time, you're also breaking the boxes to see what items are in there, so you have the items ready if you need them. See, and I got a full God Hand bar refill. That's a very good drop. So here I use it on the fat guy, because he can be a pain in the ass with his torpedoes and various moves. So I did use it on him. I think it's more of a problem when dealing with two of them, because I think they'll torpedo you off screen while you're fighting one of them. And so even one of them can be very dangerous. So you really don't want to fight two of them at the same time if you can avoid it. See, that's a very dangerous move that he does to cover the distance. I think I was contemplating, you know, getting the God Hand, but I really didn't want to use it on this guy. So, you know, you really want to save it for when you need it. Now, this area, every time you die on this area, you do have to fight all these enemies again, and then the bosses. So it always starts you before all the enemies. So that's what makes this part especially difficult. So I think these are the last enemies, but it's tough because it's two of those difficult purple guys at once. So obviously, jiggling the analog when you get grabbed will counter it. Now is a good point to use the God Hand and get rid of at least one of them. And if you can, it's great to be able to hit both of them at the same time. Well, you know, try to direct it so you're hitting the other guy too. See, I got a lot of damage in by doing that. So if you can do that, do it. Luckily, see, I got good drops. I got a strawberry from that guy, which gave me back my health. So I'm in good shape. So yeah, you're going to fight these guys as normal. You want to be careful with being too aggressive with them. You know, it's good to backflip back and then come back in when you have an opening and guard break them. You don't want to get caught in their combo flurry because it really fucking destroys you if you get hit by any of that. You'll get stuck in the combo and you'll be fucked pretty much. So yeah, now is the boss fight. So my trick here is using the dragon kick that we got in the last area. I use it to line them up perfectly. See, watch. And I hit both of them with a dragon kick. A dragon kick is intended to be a single enemy attack. It's not supposed to hit multiple enemies. But I found that if you line them up, you know, behind each other and do it, you can hit them both at once. Now, I wasn't able to perform that again, but I hit, you know, I took most of their life in one hit, as you can see on their health bar. So I try to do that again, but it only takes out one of them. But it's okay because that guy's dead now. And when you're dealing with just one of these guys, they're pretty damn easy. Two of them can be very difficult, though. One is easy enough to manage if you've been fighting, you know, regular enemies up to this point. They're not much harder if you just play them carefully. You know, you guard break them, you attack and retreat like you normally would. I mean, they can be more dangerous than the normal enemies, but not by a huge amount. So once you got one of them, you're good. But another technique that you may see me use is that I use the roulette. The roulette animation. Like when you activate the roulette, it puts everything in slow motion. Sometimes I use that to get spacing on enemies, and then I just cancel out of it. So I may do the roulette even when I don't intend on using a roulette attack, just to slow everything down and get out of an area or line guys up for a certain type of attack. So keep in mind that you can use the roulette to slow everything down and get things lined up. And with that fight, you can keep using the roulette again and again. As long as you don't use the attack, you can use the roulette mode and slow the two bosses down so that you can try to line them up perfectly and hit both with one dragon kick. I recommend trying to do that. Even if you don't do it perfectly, you're going to damage the shit out of at least one of them. But it's really better if you can hit them both with that dragon kick. So that's I recommend trying to do that as much as possible. Because if you do that twice, you win the fight. But, you know, try to at least hit them both with one attack at least once in the fight. So yeah, these guys are very irritating because they're fast and they drop a lot of bombs. They can be annoying. Basically just want to attack and retreat a lot with them. They don't take a lot of hits, but, you know, if you're not paying attention, they can pull some bullshit. As far as getting money, I'm going to explain that a little bit later. I don't show it in the video. I probably should have, but I'll explain it. What I actually recommend doing for money is using save and load states on an emulator. You can save and load in the actual game, but save and load states are way faster on an emulator. And basically saving and loading when you get the results you want in the Chihuahua race. It does take a long time. So you may have to do that for a few hours, but you can eventually amass a ton of money by doing it long enough. You're going to want to have a lot of money, at least enough to buy most of the moves and upgrades that are available. You really don't need all the moves, but you do want to buy all the health upgrades, things like that. So now this is a very hard area with a lot of enemies. There's demons that appear. This can be a very tough area. There's probably a better way to get a checkpoint in this area. I do show how to get a checkpoint. It's in one of the doors. You can activate a checkpoint, but I probably could have skipped all these enemies and went straight for the checkpoint. But maybe I was trying to farm items, or maybe I may have not realized that I could do that. So keep that in mind, that you can create a checkpoint by going in a specific door, which you'll see in a little while. Anytime a door says next area, that's usually going to be the next checkpoint. But this has a door that says next area, but it doesn't take you into a save area. It doesn't take you into like a part where you manually save. After you beat the area, you just come back out into this area again, and it seems to create a checkpoint for this area. So, or actually, what it seems to do, it seemed to reset the all the enemies. So I ended up having to fight a lot of enemies again. So that's why I say I probably could have done something different. You may want to keep an eye on exactly how that works. Maybe you can figure something out that would be more efficient. Like maybe don't fight all these enemies. Just run to that door immediately. And maybe try to grab roulettes or whatever you need before you go in that door. Because that is a very hard encounter in that door. It took me a long time to beat that encounter. It was extremely difficult. One of the harder fights. So, you know, if you can, you would want to go in that door with as much gear as you can have. Roulettes, God Hand, whatever you can bring. I would recommend that. You don't need to, but it's going to make a big difference. There's a lot of throwable items in this area, so if you're careful enough, you can get a lot of the enemy's health down by throwing shit at them, you know. You're going to break all the boxes anyway, probably, so keep that in mind. There is a launch move that you're going to see me using later, but it comes into play with the hand plant kick, because the hand plant kick can launch guys up in the air, and then you hit triangle, and you'll do a spinning kick that launches the guy super far away, and if enemies are in the way, you can launch enemies into each other. It's extremely useful crowd control technique. But we're not gonna really get that until later. I mean, if you had a launch move that launched the guy straight in the air, you could probably start doing it, you know, now with your current move set. I think there may be an uppercut that does that. But I never, you know, those are moves that I never learned early on, so there's not really much that I can say about that. But I mean, there is really in-depth combat guides online if you really want to get even deeper with the combat. But mostly what I'm going to be showing is, you know, a lot of stuff that's not that complicated. It's just it's difficult to execute, but it's not difficult to understand. So you can have pretty basic understanding of a lot of the moves and stuff, and be able to pull this shit off. Because I didn't make things overly complicated. I was just trying to beat the game. So for me, this is what ended up working fine. So yeah, if you want, you can bring these vases up and just throw them at the enemies. Get a little extra damage. In this area, you can't leave until you collect 3 crosses. It shows in the bottom right how many of the crosses you have. Certain enemies drop the cross. So with that in mind, you can maybe try to figure out how you can exploit this level and leave early, if that's what you want to do. I used the dragon kick to vaporize that motherfucker, because, I mean, those guys are a pain in the ass, and I didn't have a god hand, so I just wanted to get rid of them. When I don't have a god hand, I find those guys really difficult to deal with. But you can also waste a roulette. Now, if you go in this thing that says next area, you will end up in a whole other area, and it's like a different checkpoint. So, like I said, it's a little weird to try to map out what to do in this area. But I think as long as you get 3 crosses, you can probably leave. You might want to check a speed run and see how people get through this area super fast. Because you may be able to just, like, kill the guys with the crosses and just run out of the area and leave. Looking back, I don't even know if I had to go in that part that says next area, but I may have, because I think there might be a cross in there that you need to get. But, there's probably a way to do this a lot faster, so if you're interested in getting through this area even quicker, maybe check a speedrun video. Because I think I could have gotten out of here faster. Because after I go in this next area, it kind of resets everything, and all the enemies respawn again in the other area, so. Now, this is one of the hardest encounters, like I said, but I had a decent amount of supplies. So I start off with the La Bamba, and when there's 3 guys in a small area like this, it's extremely difficult. These guys are really fast, it seems, so I got them mostly dead with that one attack since they were grouped close together, so that was a good way to take those out. And I'm not sure if that was the best choice of an attack, but yeah, actually that was good. I guess I knew those guys were coming in, because that hit everybody, so. Again, that wiped out most of their health on those 3 guys, so you can take them out faster. So you already got 6 guys down if you're fortunate enough to have all these roulettes. That's why I recommend having them before you go in here if possible. Try to grab the shit. So now I had a god hand, so I immediately used that on the demon. If not, if you don't have a lot of good shit, you're going to maybe rely on having like really good item drops. And it's going to be a lot harder, so. Eventually you may get good item drops if you die enough times, but that's one of the reasons why this encounter can be extremely difficult, because you have very little health at this point, you die very fast, and you really don't have a lot of great moves to use. Later you'll have much more useful crowd control techniques. Especially the hand plant kick. But you also have ways to get God Hand meter up a lot faster with that yes, KABLAM, thank you, ma'am, or whatever the fuck it's called. I forgot exactly what it's called, but once you get that, you can extract God Hand from stunned enemies. It's extremely useful. You can pretty much farm God Hand from when there's only one enemy left. And I'm going to show that later. But we don't have that move yet. I find that this barrel roll move, where you like roll in the air and then drop down and launch everybody, is very useful on these guys, because they tend to run right into where you're at. So if you keep doing it, eventually there's a good chance that they'll just run right into it and get launched and take massive damage. So while I don't find that move to be useful in hard mode almost ever, because enemies are usually too fast, for these guys in this part I find it a very useful move. So use the barrel roll if you have it. It can make this part a lot more manageable, I found. Of course, use your jump kick launches. Also, the way the game works, if you land a jump kick right after an enemy does a move, I believe you get counter damage, and that's when the enemy gets launched back from the jump kick. As you notice, if you keep doing jump kicks on guys, sometimes they don't get launched, and sometimes they do. I believe it's because you landed it at a vulnerable point, like right after they did an attack. This game is really detailed with the combat, and you can counter moves by timing things perfectly. I don't know if I even really knew about that when I was playing, but I learned about some of that stuff later. But if you can land the jump kicks at the right time, you can launch the guys back and do a lot more damage, it seems. So now we have 3 of these extremely difficult regular enemies. So I used the dragon kick here. I think I was able to fuck up that one guy, maybe kill him. But unfortunately, I didn't line up multiple guys like with the Mr. Gold and Silver fight, which would have been, made it much easier. But I did have a God Hand, so, I saved it for this, because these guys are very, very hard. This is probably the hardest part of the fight with these 3 guys. So if you can, try to save your resources best you can. For this fight, I didn't have any problem with wasting all my resources, like all my roulettes, anything I had. Because this is extremely hard encounter. So for this, this I allowed myself to use everything I could get. Sometimes an encounter will be so difficult you just want to get through it, so you'll be willing to have less shit in the next area. But I think all the boxes and shit respawn after this fight. So do the enemies, though, so you can grab a bunch of shit again, I believe. Try to refill your roulettes and your God Hand meter and shit. But yeah, now that we're just down to one guy, it's pretty standard. But, getting it down to this point and getting to the last guy is very tough. It's a very tight area as well, and, you can get stuck on certain things, so this is one of the harder encounters. So, I mean, don't be too stressed out if you die on this for hours, because this could take hours to beat. It's a very difficult encounter. This is one of those games that, I would say just keep working on it and invest the time, invest the hours you need to learn crowd control techniques, And basically what I've been explaining here should work for anyone as far as backflipping and then closing a distance with jump kicks, running, retreating. I play aggressively but also very evasively. Like I will create distance between me and the enemies, but then I immediately run back in with jump kicks, and then I start my combos again. Then I retreat again, come back in with jump kicks, start my combos again, guard breaks, etc. And later on I'll be adding launches to the mix. When I get the hand plant kick, I can launch guys very easily, so I'll explain that later. Yeah, so here, see, all the guys respawned again. And I have one cross. I think maybe why I'm still fighting guys is because I still need to get more of those crosses. But, I really suggest watching a speed run if you want to know how this section works, because I didn't really understand it too well. I'm not sure if certain enemies drop the crosses or if it's random. The only thing I know is you cannot exit this area until you have 3 crosses. So use that information. You can also make checkpoints by going in that really hard encounter door. But like I said, you probably don't want to go in there unless you have full stuff. You want to have as many roulettes and God Hand as you can have. So try to grab as much of that shit as you can and save it for that door. Once you beat that door and get that out of the way, the rest of the level is not that hard if you play it carefully. And you're going to see at the end of this section, I just run out through the door and just leave and ignore a bunch of enemies. Because all I needed to do was get the 3rd cross, and then you can leave. So keep these things in mind. Hammers are always nice, so utilize that. As far as the demons, they mostly appear randomly. I think there may be a few scripted demons that always appear in the same enemy, but a lot of this demon shit is random. I don't know if any of them were scripted in this particular area, because it's been a long-ass time. But like I said, I'm going by memory, and I did a little bit of research to try to remember some shit, but there's going to be things that I'm just not going to remember, because when it was fresh in my head, I could have broken things down a little bit better. But I think I'm going to be able to explain most of what I'm doing. So yeah, I didn't end up getting a cross in there, so maybe that might be... Or maybe I left to go get more shit. I probably left to go get more health and things like that. That's why I say take your time, retreat if you need to, so you can reset the position of the enemy. See, because now he's going to go back in the door. And since he's back in the door, I can now throw this vase at him and do some vase damage. So it's not a lot of damage, but this shit helps when you're having trouble with a guy. Throw some vases at him. Even if you have to carry them a while, you can just carry them throughout the level and until you kill the guy. Also, I did it, but I mean, you may not have noticed, but see that statue of Elvis, the boss Elvis, he's holding a magazine with skulls on it? If you hit that enough times, it drops a book. And that book will give you a full God Hand refill. I think I do it again here. Yeah, I do it for a second time here, so you'll see. So you get a full God Hand refill. So, get that when you need it. But it's not a pickup that you can go back and get later. So only do it when you need a refill. If you're almost full, then just use what you have and finish off some of the enemies. Again, I don't think you have to kill everybody here. You just have to get the crosses. So that's why I say a speedrun video for this section would probably be useful to look over. I always do a lot of research, even when I'm playing these games. I check videos. Game Facts is great for different techniques, move lists, all that shit. But I think my tutorial is unique in that I don't use what a lot of other people were using. Most people don't use the back roll, the back flip like I do. I use it to play very aggressively. I'm evasive and aggressive at the same time, you know, because I back flip, but then I immediately close the distance with jump kicks. So it looks like I'm trying to get away, but then I immediately go back, you know. Because the reason I do that is because I don't like doing that bobbing and weaving shit where you stand in place by hitting the right analog stick up. Because like I said, you get hit by low attacks. You won't get hit by any high attacks, but you'll get hit by low attacks, probably grabs. Certain other attacks will hit you. So not really worth it to me. I mean, if you're good with predicting, you know, the low attacks, then you can do it very skillfully. But it's going to take a lot more practice to master that. So it's up to you if you want to get good with that. But I recommend just doing it this way unless you're trying to do some flashy shit. So yeah, I think this fat guy has the cross. You need the third one. But I don't know if the same guys always have them, like I said. It may be fixed, but I don't know. So I use the God Hand to take this guy out. And see, now the cross is on the ground. So I use this to give myself some distance, and then I just grab the cross and leave. See, I grab the cross, and now I just get the fuck out of here. I didn't even grab the health, because I know I could get a health refill. Now, I could have fucked around and hung out there longer and tried to grab more items, but I didn't even bother. I just got the fuck out of there because it was getting kind of crazy in that area. So you see, I grabbed the last one, just got out. Now, for some reason, this fight took me around 6 hours to beat, this one boss fight. And a big part was that I was being super fucking stubborn and trying to farm. I was trying to farm the perfect item drop on this guy, so I didn't have to learn how to fight him, basically. I wanted to try to beat him with mainly like roulettes and God Hand, which is being really fucking lazy. But I just did that for like 6 hours. And on top of that, I didn't really mind because I was getting a shit ton of money. See, my money says 333,000. I got all that money from dying on this fight and grabbing the coin each time I died, because your money stays with you even when you die and continue. So I was getting a shit ton of money. I mean, it's not a fast way to get money, but I didn't really care too much because like I actually, that money carried me through a lot of the game to buy moves and shit. So I didn't have to do as much gambling as I would have had to. I don't recommend getting money that way. It's probably a pretty fucking slow way to do it. But I was kind of just like, you know, in a relaxed, somewhat zone, just fucking around for 6 hours. But anyway, the way to fight this guy is you're going to want to roll back when he jumps up in the air. Say like that. Because then he'll stomp down and you do massive damage. So be ready to roll back. You have to be pretty twitchy to predict that. Break his guard whenever he blocks. And basically just combo him and break his guard. He's really not that fucking hard. I should have fought him normally early. Obviously, you have to also dodge that charging punch he does. You want to roll back from that as well. But this really shouldn't have taken me 6 hours. But I was just being really fucking stubborn. Like I honestly didn't even try to learn how to fight the guy. I didn't even bother trying to fight him normally for like many hours. So that was my fault. So as long as you actually try to fight him, he's really not that hard. You got to be aggressive with the back rolls and dodging everything, and be ready to guard break him and combo him. You know, use everything you have. Use the roulettes. Use the dragon kick is going to do the most damage. So hopefully you still have that, because that does massive damage on him. And you know, try to charge up that God Hand. Get the stagger, which will increase your God Hand. And let me know if you have any questions, and stay tuned for the rest.